Welcome back to another edition of Dave Smith Unleashed. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube page, Dave Smith Unleashed. And we love hearing from you. We love reading your comments. We also love reading your comments on my Twitter page, @DaveSportsGuy. You know, I'm looking forward to these games coming up in the college football playoff. We got one game on New Year's Eve, and we got 3 games on New Year's Day. And the 3 games on New Year's Day, well, it kind of reminds me of the way it used to be, doesn't it? The way it used to be when we were kids. But first, let's preview what's coming up. Dave Smith Unleashed, brought to you by MTS Transportations. And mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off on your next shipment for all your shipping, trucking, and freight needs. There's only one business to call, and that's MTS Transportations at 800-640-6873. MTS Transportations, 800-640-6873. Alabama defeats Oklahoma in round 1, coming back from a 17-0 deficit on the road and winning 34-24, an impressive performance by the Tide. And then you had Oregon blowing out James Madison, and Mississippi, Ole Miss blowing out Tulane, and all those, and Miami winning maybe the worst playoff game I've ever seen, 10-3 over Texas A&M, but a very, very good defensive performance by the Hurricanes. So that sets up all kinds of interesting scenarios here, doesn't it? December 31st, New Year's Eve. Ohio State, the defending national champions, in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, playing the Miami Hurricanes. Now, Miami was impressive with that defensive performance against Texas A&M. Ohio State is a 9.5 point favorite last time I checked. Boy, that is a big line against a good Miami team. Now, talent for talent, man for man, these teams are probably about even. Miami is extremely talented. Maybe not as good at the wide receiver position. Maybe not as good at quarterback, because I'm not a big fan of Carson Beck, but I think Ohio State's a better team, but it's close. What isn't close is the guys wearing the headsets on the sidelines. Ryan Day is a very, very good college football coach with a national championship under his belt. Mario Cristobal is a very, very bad college football coach. He's a good recruiter. He's enthusiastic. His players like him. He's a former Hurricane. He has his dream job right now. But there's not a worse coach in college football at managing the clock, managing his timeouts, and sideline game management decisions. He is a disaster, and he never learns from his mistakes. This stubborn guy keeps making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and he never learns. So I think that's a huge advantage for Ohio State. And every single game Miami's lost in the Cristobal era has been because of something stupid he did on the sidelines late in the game. I mean, nonsensical, stupid, ridiculous decisions. So I think for that reason alone, I'm going with Ohio State, because Cristobal, sure as we're sitting here, will do something stupid. My Oregon Ducks. Now we go to January 1st, New Year's Day, a 2.5 point favorite over a very good Texas Tech team. That game is the Orange Bowl played in Miami. Texas Tech is good. Of course I'm picking my Ducks, of course. But you know, the Ducks have never won a national championship. We've made the national championship game a couple of times and lost both of them. I think to Auburn and to Florida State. Well, I think it was Ohio State, whatever. We lost 2 national championship games. But I think this could be the year, because for the first time, Oregon can hold up on the offensive and defensive lines. That's usually where my Ducks have trouble, because we're a soft team. Normally, we get in there against the big boys of the SEC or the Big Ten, and we get pushed all over the field. This year, the offensive and defensive lines are much better. I think this could be the year. Now, granted, that game against Indiana was alarming. And speaking of Indiana, they're 7-point favorites in the Rose Bowl against Alabama. Can you imagine Indiana ever being favored in a football game over Alabama, particularly by 7 points? Well, that's the case now since Curt Cignetti came on the scene and took over the Indiana program. And I wasn't a believer in Indiana last year. I thought they played a weak schedule. They got to the college football playoff, and they got blown out in the first round by Notre Dame. And I said, well, see, they're not that good. They're overrated. They're kind of a mirage team. They didn't play anybody. And they won a bunch of games early this season. And around midseason, they came out to Autzen Stadium to play a very, very difficult road game against my Oregon Ducks. And I said, okay, here we go. Indiana's going to get exposed again. These same guys that got blown out by Notre Dame last year, now they're playing a tough road game against a good team, their first tough game of the year. Watch what happens now. Well, that shows you what I know, doesn't it? Because Indiana richly deserved to win that game. They beat They beat my Ducks 30-20 at Autzen Stadium, one of the most difficult places to play in the country. And that was no fluke. That was a richly deserved victory by Indiana. They dominated up front on both sides of the ball, which concerned me greatly because that's been Oregon's problem against the Power Boys over the years. And they looked good. Indiana made a believer out of me that day. And then, wow, they barely got by Penn State. They barely got by Ohio State, beating them, what was it, 13-10. Fernando Mendoza wins the Heisman Trophy. Boy, it's a new era of Indiana football. Whoever thought they'd be any good at the sport of football, but they are. They're undefeated and they're ranked number 1. They're favored by 7 over Alabama. I just think Indiana's going to get by. They're for real. They made a believer out of me against Oregon. A difficult game against Alabama. I kind of like Indiana in that one. And the last game of the night on New Year's Day, Georgia favored by 6.5 in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans over Ole Miss. I think this will kind of be a replay of the game earlier in the year where Ole Miss keeps it close early and Georgia pulls away late and wins. So by my estimation, we'll have Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, and Georgia in the semifinals. Which brings me to great memories and the tradition of college football leaving. Now, I love the fact that we've got 3 very important playoff games coming up on New Year's Day, the quarterfinals. That's fantastic. And a game on New Year's Eve. That reminds me of the old days. Boy, my dad loved college football, and he loved the Pac-8 and the Pac-10 back in the day. And boy, we'd set the alarm for early January 1st every year. We'd watch the Sugar Bowl and the Cotton Bowl in the morning. And the Cotton Bowl was always the Southwest Conference champion against the at-large team. And the Sugar Bowl would be the SEC champion against an at-large team. And then after those games are over, we go to the afternoon. Oh, the granddaddy of them all. My dad's favorite sporting event of the year, the Rose Bowl. He loved the Pac-8 / Pac-10 back in the day, and he hated the Big Ten with a blinding, white-hot passion. You know, early on in the Pac-8 to Big Ten agreement, I think the Big Ten won the first 7 games back in the 40s and 50s. And my dad told me when he used to work at Lockheed, he worked with a couple of Midwestern guys. They'd always come in after the Rose Bowl and say, you just don't play the brand of ball out here. You're soft, wussies. My dad would get so enraged. And then when the Pac-8, Pac-10 started dominating, he got his comeuppance, and then he had the edge over them. And he loved the Rose Bowl. And then at night, it usually turned out to be the best game of them all. The Big 8 champion, which was almost always Oklahoma or Nebraska, going up against the top-ranked at-large team. Boy, those are always some great games, the Orange Bowl. And the best thing about New Year's Day back then, there was no playoff, but the 4 major bowl games, Sugar, Cotton, Rose, and Orange. Some years, all 4 of them would have national championship implications. We wouldn't know who the national champion was until after the Orange Bowl ended, which was the greatest thing. It was a roller coaster, like 12, 13 hours straight of football, and every game had implications on the national championship. I love those days. And that brings me to the question here. Yeah, we have the college football playoff now. Now we're settling it on the field. Yes, now the best teams are playing each other, and I guess that's all good. And we're getting 3 high-level playoff caliber games on New Year's Day. Okay. But is it better than the old system? Well, and the more I think about it, I kind of like the way it used to be. When we had regional conferences all over the country, when we had the Pac-10 and the Southwest Conference, which was a great football conference, and the Big East turned out to be a good conference. And then you had the SEC, ACC, Big Ten. We had 6 or 7 major conferences back then, and they were regional, all in different parts of the country. What do we have now? The Big Ten is on the East Coast, the West Coast, and in the Midwest. It stretches from coast to coast. The ACC now has Cal and Stanford. It's called the Atlantic Coast Conference, gentlemen, not the Pacific Atlantic Conference. A lot of the rivalries and traditions are gone now. And you know the way this is going. We're going to eventually get to 24 teams in the Big Ten, 24 in the SEC, and it's going to be a 2-conference college football landscape scenario, which I would hate. I like the regional stuff. I like conferences all over the country. And now, speaking of tradition, as we talked about in the last show on Dave Smith Unleashed, USC Notre Dame's over. They're not going to play again at the earliest until 2030. And USC's making the excuse, well, we don't want to play them late in the season anymore because losing to them this year, it was right in the middle of the Big Ten season and we had to travel again 2,000 miles and it knocked us out of the playoff. Okay, crybaby Lincoln Riley. Okay, The reason you're not in the playoff isn't because you lost to Notre Dame. It's because you lost 3 games. You lost 2 other times. So don't give me that song and dance. And Notre Dame proposed week 0. We'll play every year, but it'll be opening week of the season. Excuse me, USC proposed that, not Notre Dame. Week 0, opening week. Notre Dame said, no, we're not going to do that. USC said, okay, then the series is canceled. Wow. 100 years. 1926 it started. The only times they didn't play was 3 years during World War II and once during the COVID years. Now it's gone. See, that the playoff and the expansion of college football with 2 major conferences now dominating has kind of ruined the tradition, and it's ruined the regional aspect. I miss the old days. Call me an old fart. Call me a get-off-my-lawn guy. Call me somebody who's against progress. But the more I think about it, I preferred it when we didn't have a playoff, when we had regional conferences, when New Year's Day was 4 major bowl games, and they were a scramble, and they were exciting, and it was built up to the Orange Bowl, and we never knew who the national champion was going to be till the end of the night. I miss those days, watching it with my father and loving college football. Well, that's it for me. Make sure to check us out on the YouTube page at the Dave Smith Unleashed Podcast, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And go to our Twitter handle at Dave Sports God, and we can kick it around. You can comment there as well. And I'm always posting on Twitter when the next show is going to be, who the guest is going to be, what time it's going to be on. So check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Twitter, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Dave Smith Unleashed.